Welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. Today we're going to take a look at creating an avatar person, or whatever you would refer to this person as, the other blue people that aren't Smurfs, I suppose you could call them. We're going to take a look at the techniques, so you can take these general techniques hopefully and apply them to any photograph that you like that you may be working on. So let's jump in and get started. I'm going to hop into Photoshop here. I'm going to bring my panels back, and the first thing I need to do is open up the photo that I want to apply this effect to. So right here I've got this Christina avatar.jpg, and this was an incredible model that I had the opportunity to photograph several years ago in one of my first ever lighting classes, and this was one of the photos that we got from that class. So we're going to begin by first talking about the kind of image that we have, and one of the things you want is the sharper and the clearer and the better lit the image. I think it just goes without saying you're going to have a better finished result. So you want to start with a decent photo. If it's a photo of yourself where you have virtually no light in your eyes and it's kind of taken in your closet with your camera phone, probably not going to be the best photo to do this effect on. However, you can still give it a shot, and again, the general techniques that we're following, you should be able to do it to any photo. But the better your starting image, the better finished final result you're going to have in virtually every instance. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and add some detail to the skin. Her skin appears to be pretty smooth, and if we zoom in, you can see that it's not 100,000% smooth, and that's good, but we want it to be even less smooth than this. We want to add additional detail. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer by going Layer, New, Layer, and I'm just going to name this layer Skin Detail, and I'm going to fill this layer with 50% gray by going Edit, Fill, 50% gray, hit OK, and we're going to apply some noise here. So I'm first going to set my foreground and background colors to white and black by hitting the letter D, and I'm going to go Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and I want to add 35%. So right like that, looks great, hit OK, and then what I'm going to do is go Filter, Stylize, Emboss. And now you can see it almost has this nice little sort of, I don't know how to describe it, scrunchy, if that's even a real word. The angle we're going to choose is 50 degrees, a height of 3 pixels, and generally you want your angle to follow the general lighting pattern and light direction in the photo. So 50 degrees is probably about what's right for us here. Again, there's some forgiveness when it comes to, you don't have to be super exact with the angle. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And an amount of 90% is going to work just fine for us here as well. Go ahead and hit OK, and we're going to set this skin detail layer to a blend mode of soft light. So you can see there's this subtle pattern that's been overlaid over, well, the entire image. So you can even see it here on our background where it's quite pronounced. So we want to get rid of all of that and only preserve it over her skin. So we're going to apply a layer mask. Now, the hotkey is hold down your Alt or Option key and just click on the little layer mask icon at the base of your layers panel. And it's going to apply a layer mask but fill it with black. So that's great because, well, it hides everything and we can just paint this effect where we want it. So grab your brush tool, and we're going to set the opacity of the brush tool to something fairly low, maybe around 10%, 10-15%. We're painting with white because we want to reveal the skin texture, and we're going to go ahead and just begin painting wherever we want some of the skin texture to show through, and it's an extremely subtle effect, something that you're barely going to see, but excellence is made in going the extra 10% 100 times. In doing that, you make an image 1,000 times better. So it's all about the little things. It's all about the little things. Focus on the details and the little things first. So we're just painting in all of this skin detail where we want. I'm not going to be concerned with her neck here because that's actually falling out of focus already. So I don't want to add detail down there where you're obviously not going to see that kind of very crisp, sharp detail. So areas where there's more detail and I can pick up more detail on the skin, I'm just painting a couple extra strokes with the brush to really make sure we get some great detail in there. And you can see there's before and there's after. There we go. And yeah, very, very subtle effect, but it's going to make a difference. So the next thing we're going to do is adjust the lighting with a curves adjustment layer. And basically the point of this curves adjustment layer, well, let me show you. Let's go ahead and add a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to pull down on the darks. Alright, so what I'm trying to do is just simply darken the scene around her. But the problem is, you can see it's darkening her as well. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to just select the layer mask, grab my brush tool, I'm going to boost the opacity to somewhere up around 80%, and I'm going to paint with black. I just hit the letter X to set black as my foreground color. It's just flipping the foreground and background color. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, so right click and just increase the size. I'm going to push it up around 400 to 500 pixels, maybe even a little bit larger. I got them up to 700 pixels here, and I'm just going to begin painting here to get rid of some of that darkness effect, right? So there's before, there's after. We're sort of just darkening her hair and the background, everything around her face, which we don't quite want to darken. Maybe I'll even brighten up the shoulders here just so they're sort of matching everything else. All right, great. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and begin by dodging and burning. And there's a bunch of different ways that I'll dodge and burn generally when I'm working with just my general photography. And this is one way that sometimes I'll go ahead and dodge and burn. We're going to create a new layer by going Layer, New, Layer. And we can name it anything we want. I'm going to name it Dodge/Burn and hit OK. We're going to fill this layer by going Edit, Fill, and we're going to fill it with 50% gray. And then we're immediately going to set this layer to a blend mode of soft light. So what we're going to do next is grab the Dodge tool. So we've got the Dodge and Burn tools here. Sounds like something that we're going to want to use here in a moment. So we're going to start with the Dodge tool. I've got the range set to midtones and the exposure set to 10%. This is all so we're really essentially weakening the Dodge tool way down so we can very carefully go in and begin dodging and burning our photo. So what I'm going to do, I'm on this Dodge burn layer. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And I'm going to begin dodging, and dodging is increasing the brightness. So I'm going to start painting over areas that are already pretty bright. So I've got these highlights on the side of her face. We're going to increase them first, right? Those are pretty obvious. Then I'm going to increase the size of the brush. I'm just using my square bracket keys. I'm going to increase this highlight here on her chin, and we've got a highlight here on her cheek, and another highlight over here on that cheek, then right here at the top of her lip, and then each of these little lines running out of the bottom of her nose. We're going to run along the top of her top lip. And then also there's a highlight right there on her actual lips. So that's great. We're going to go ahead and boost that up. Then we have these highlights here on her nose, so we're going to increase them. I'm just painting over them a couple times. One highlight running down the length of her nose. And then we sort of this generally large highlight on this side of her face. So I'm really going to increase the size of the brush. And I'm going to paint just a few times. And as I'm painting, I'm using my bracket key to make the brush a little bit smaller. So I'm sort of just fading that brightness down a little bit. So you can see there's before, there's after. Pretty subtle so far, but we are making some change. There's before, there's after, before, after. Great. I can go ahead and increase the brightness down here on her shoulders. That's very cool. We're going to increase this highlight out here on her shoulder, increase the highlight back here, sort of at the base of the collarbone, or really the top of the deltoid, I guess. And then we're going to increase the brightness there on that part of her neck and here on that part of her neck. And just generally go over the face with a couple passes to brighten things up. So there's before, there's after. Great. We're going to take a look at really intensifying this in a moment. Now, you can just go ahead and switch to the burn tool if you like, but just a little quick hotkey. If you hold down the Alt or Option key while using the Dodge tool, it's automatically going to switch you over to the burn tool, and we can paint over the eyebrows, let's say, to make them a little bit darker. But in this case, because we have so much burning to do, I'm just going to switch to the burn tool, and we're going to take care of all of our burning right here. I'm just going to make sure my hardness is set to 0%. A size of about 250, maybe 300 is about what we want. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to burn here at the edge of her hair, right, where the hair is sort of meeting up with her skin. To the shadow side of her nose, I'm just going to increase that a little bit. Whoa, and our burn tool is a little bit strong here because if you look, the exposure's up at 100%. There we go. We're going to reduce that to about 10%, something, well, okay, so I'm at 12%. Let me go over the edge of her hair again. I was going to say it looked like it was coming on a little strong. And then to the shadow side of the nose, to the top portion of the eye. We don't really want to do underneath the eyes. All that's going to do is make it look like we're building these bags under her eyes. Right beneath the lower lip, there's usually a little shadow there between where the lower lip stops and sort of the chin bone begins protruding underneath the chin, just to create a little bit more separation from the bottom of the head and the neck. And then just these shadowy areas here. And there's a shadow there. And then sort of a big shadow down that side of her face. So there's before, there's after, right? So we've got sort of this little effect going on, and then maybe I'll even here to enhance her cheekbones a little bit, make them just pop a little more. Great. As well as the dimples on her cheeks. And there we have it. So we've gone ahead and done the initial dodging and burning. And what I want to do is duplicate this dodge and burn layer once or twice just to really intensify this effect that I've created. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J, and it's going to duplicate the layer once, so you can see we've added, and then Command or Control J one more time to enhance that effect or increase that effect even more. Now this last layer, I'm looking up here, and you can really see where the dodge or where the burn tool is at 100%. We really have this super dark area. So I'm going to grab my dodge tool, excuse me, the burn tool is at 100% exposure, and I'm just going to paint over that a few times. And I'm going to go back to the middle layer here. I'm going to paint over that a few times, like so. So we just loosen that up or lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to select the last dodge burn layer that we copied, and to sort of help this layer sort of, well, weaken it and also blend it with everything else a little bit more, we could just reduce the opacity, but instead I'm going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to blur this about 50 pixels. Now I'm just doing that because this is a massive image we're working on. If you're working on a smaller image, you might only have to blur it 25 pixels. Hit OK. And you can see if we shut that layer off, turn it on, it's just a very, very subtle effect. So we can see here's the image we started with, and here's what we have now. So all subtle effects, but we're building a nice, strong foundation. Now we're going to go ahead and start doing something kind of fun. We're going to begin by editing the eyes. So we've worked on the skin, now it's time to go to the eyes. So hit Command Shift Option or Control Shift Alt E to merge all of our layers to a new layer. And I'm just going to name this Eyes Base. And we're going to grab our lasso tool. So I've zoomed in here, and I'm going to grab my lasso tool, and I'm going to just create a selection around each eye, one at a time. So I'm going to create a selection like so, and I'm going to feather this selection. So I'm going to go Select, Modify, Feather, and I think I'm going to feather this about 40 pixels. Well, there we go. We're at 40 pixels. Hit OK, and then just hit Command or Control J to pop that eyeball up onto its own layer. Say it's on its own layer with these nice soft edges. Great. We're going to go back to our eyes base layer right over here. With our lasso tool, we'll create a selection around the other eye. All right, just like so. And then again, we'll go Select, Modify, Feather, and 40 pixels for that. Command or Control J to pop that up onto its own layer. Great. Now that we have these eyes on their own layer, we can sort of work with them individually. So I can just name them if I want, and I probably will. Why not? Let's go left eye. This is camera left. And then right eye, which I misspelled, but, well, you know what? I will just fix it. There we go, right eye. So we've got our right and our left eyes. Now the first thing we need to do is sort of upsize these eyes. And here's how we're going to do that. It's pretty simple. You just hit Command or Control T to bring up Free Transform. But the important thing here is we need to make sure these eyes sort of stay in the right place with relation to the rest of her face. If I just go and scale this up, you can see it's going to look crazy because half of her eye is off of her face to this side. I don't like that. So it all comes down to this little reference point. We want to drag that reference point to the very center of her pupil, all right, or about the center of her pupil, and then hold down Shift and Alt, or just come up here to the width and height, and I don't know, let's see what looks about right. Let's go with something that's maybe about 115 pixels, or 115%, excuse me. So 115%, 115%, and to return to commit that change. Now notice we do have some like haziness happening over here. We'll just use a mask to get rid of that in a moment. Let's take care of enlarging the left eye. Command or Control T. Move that reference point to the center of the pupil. And again, remember, 115% for our width and 115% for our height. And go ahead and commit the change. So if we zoom out, her eyes are now quite a bit larger, before, after. So we've really bulked up the eyes. Now we need to just mask away those edges. Like we talked about a moment ago. And I can probably actually just merge these into one layer. So I'm going to hit Command or Control E to merge them into one layer and just call this layer Eyes and apply a layer mask to this layer. Grab my brush tool, all right. I'm going to set the opacity to 100%. We want to get rid of everything we see. And I'm just going to gently paint away areas that are here off of her head where the skin color could be just covering up some of the ear or some of the hair. Now, the next step is to enlarge the actual iris, right? The colored part of the eye with the pupil sitting there in the center of it. So we're going to do this. Let's zoom in even closer and grab the elliptical marquee tool. Hold down your Shift key and just drag out a selection that's going to be as close to perfect over that portion of the eye as you can get. So something like that looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and hit Command or Control J. I'm going to make sure I've got that layer selected. Command or Control J to pop that up onto its own layer. And I'm going to name this left iris. And then I'm going to slide across my document. I'm going to select that eye layer again. And I'm going to hold down my Shift key using the elliptical marquee tool. And I'm going to create as perfect a selection as I can. There we go, something like so. Let's see here. Maybe like that. Looks good. Hit Command or Control J to pop that eyeball up onto its own layer and name this one right iris. So now that we've done this, I'm going to select right iris, Command or Control T, and I'm just going to increase the size of it quite a bit here. Let's bring it up. Let's bring these up to like 120% of their original size. That looks about right. And then we're going to drag it down just a little bit and place it right about where it needs to go. Enter a return to commit that change. Whoop. Slide across. Select the left iris. We're going to do the same thing. Command or Control T. 120%. 120%. Great. Slide this guy down. Right about so. Hit the check icon to commit the change. All right, now that we've done that, we've duplicated the top part of the eyelash. We also have the eye sitting over the bottom portion of the eyelid down here. So we need to break out a mask for each, the left and the right iris. So we'll start with the left iris because we're here. Click on the layer mask icon to apply a layer mask. Grab the brush tool, size that brush tool way down, paint with black, and just gently paint over this bottom portion so we can really set the eyeball right in where it belongs. If you paint away some part of the eyeball that should stay, flip your color so you're painting with white and just paint the eye right back where it goes. Now I'm painting with black again. I'm choosing the letter X to switch back and forth, and I'm going to paint away the additional eyelash that's been created up here. We want to get rid of any duplicated anythings. There we go. That looks great. So there's before, there's after. Now we're going to pop over to this eye, right iris, add a layer mask by choosing the Add Layer Mask icon. I'm painting with black. I'm going to paint away here at the base of the eye. Right? You can see I'm purposely painting away too much so that I can just paint back exactly what I need. Just like that. Perfect. And I'm going to paint with black again, and I'm going to get rid of the duplicated eyelash up above. So there we have it. All right, I'm going to zoom out, and you can see there's before and there's after. In fact, there's before we started doing anything to this image, and there's after. So we've made the eyes larger, we've made the irises much larger, and we're ready to move on and I believe begin coloring the eyes. Actually, before we color the eyes, let's edit the nose. All those avatar figures have those weird kind of wide, flat noses. So we're again going to merge all of our layers to a new layer. Control Shift Alt or Command Shift Option E, and we're going to name this layer Nose. And we're going to jump into the liquefy command. Actually, I'm going to save this document before I go much further. I'm just going to name it Christina Avatar Rect, just so we know what's going on. And, of course, so we preserve our work. And now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and go Filter, Liquefy. And here in the Liquefy panel, which let me see if I can make it a little bit smaller to fit it all on screen. Here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by using the bloat tool, and I'm just going to bloat the nose a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in just a touch, and I'm going to make this tool a little bit larger. You can adjust the brush size over here or by using your bracket keys, and I'm just going to bloat the nose, just all the way up and down the nose. I'm going to bloat it. Just tapping just a couple times. Then I'm going to grab this kind of smudge tool, but it's not called the smudge tool. The forward warp tool is what it's called here. And we're going to pull the nose sort of down, but not the center of the nose. We sort of want to flatten out the bottom of her nose. So I'm going to pull this portion of her nose down. It's going to sort of give the impression that she has a much wider sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, just funky looking nose. Maybe we can even pull the middle part of it up a little bit. So it just sort of broadens the base of the nose, therefore giving the impression that she has a much wider nose. We can see before, where it's a nice sort of normal looking nose, afterward where we just kind of make it go a little crazy. So we've got our nose. Now we're going to go ahead and add some depth and detail to the eyes before we begin coloring them. So let's zoom in here, and we'll start with this eye, and this is where it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'll probably speed through it. Oh, let me explain. I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer. By the way, if you don't have this adjustments panel, you can go layer, new adjustment layer, and add a curves adjustment layer just like so. We're going to set the blend mode of this curves adjustment layer to screen. You can see it's going to make our entire image much, much brighter, right? Before, after. We want to select our layer mask and just hit Command or Control I. That's going to invert the color of the layer mask, so it's going to give us the opposite of white. Well, the opposite of white, there you go. You see it. It's black, and black is going to hide our entire effect. Now that we've done that, duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and set the blend mode of this second curves adjustment layer to multiply. And this, you can see, is making our image much darker, but we have that black layer mask, so you're not going to see any change. So I'm going to start with the screen adjustment layer. Make sure that you've selected the layer mask and zoom in on the eye you want to begin working on. I'm over here on the left eye. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to grab a very small hard-edged brush. I just right-clicked there. That's how you bring up this little dialog box. Very small hard-edged brush. I'm painting with white, and my opacity is 100%. All right, 2 is going to be about right. 2 pixel brush is going to be great. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to paint over all of these little highlights that I see in the eye. I'm just going to bring out as absolutely as much detail as I can. That's exactly what I'm going for, and probably I will speed it up through this part of the video so you can see me just go through and quickly apply all of this to all of these little highlights, and then I'm going to go through with the multiply, and I'm going to see all these darker areas in between. I'm going to be painting over them with the darker multiply adjustment layer. So hang tight. We're going to speed this thing up. If you need to pause it, feel free to pause if you're following along, if you can see this kind of detail in whatever eyeball you're working on. And I'll see you in just a moment. Alright, and there you can see that we have now gone ahead and added a whole bunch of light and shadow detail at a very, very, very minor level in the eyes. So we've zoomed way in and just painted in these very subtle details. Now, what we need to do is it looks kind of like she has all this like strange, you know, almost these little worms crawling around underneath her eye, which isn't necessarily the nicest thing. At least that's not what we're going for. So what I'm going to do instead is go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to blur this very, very subtly. 50 pixels is way too much. We're going to try like 1.5 pixels maybe. So if I check off preview, check on preview, that looks pretty good. 1.5 pixels is great, and I'm going to do the same thing with the multiply layer. By the way, I'm blurring, excuse me, the mask itself, not the actual layer. You can't really blend an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to the multiplies mask and hit Command or Control F to blur that. So we can see there's before, there's after. So we've created an insane amount of detail in her eyes, which is just going to kind of help us moving forward. And you can see when we zoom all the way out, still looks pretty realistic as far as the eyes are concerned. Now the size and everything, yes, it's way off, but I'm just talking when it comes to the detail in the eyes, it can look semi-real. So now what we need to do is go ahead and add some color to these eyes. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a hue saturation adjustment layer, which we can find right up here. Hue saturation. We're going to boost the hue. Well, let's just keep going up until I see a green that I like. Plus 30 is actually pretty good. Let's make it a little bit more saturated though. Plus 30. Let's round it off to a nice even number. Plus 35. And then brightness. Let's just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just trying to pay attention to the color of the eyes, by the way. Ignore everything else because we're about to select this mask and hit Command or Control I to invert that. We're going to go over to these eyes and we're going to paint the color into the iris portion of the eyes using our brush tool. So here I'm going to grab a slightly larger brush, maybe something like a 45 pixel soft edge brush. I'm painting at an opacity of 100%, and I'm just going to paint all of this green color right into the eye, just like that. If you get any of the color on anything else, you can just paint with black to get rid of it. I'm going to go do the same thing to the other eye. The other eye is a little bit darker, so it might take the color a little bit stronger than the eye to the right, but you know what, actually that looks pretty good. So the eyes look pretty crazy right now, which is about what we're going for. We're going to colorize the eyes even more by creating a fill color layer, so or a solid color fill layer. So we're going to go Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color, and we're going to set this layer to a blend mode of Soft Light right here in the New Fill Layer dialog box. We're going to hit OK. And the color that I want to use, actually that looks pretty cool, doesn't it, with the black, what it does to the eyes, really brings out a lot of detail and adds an awful lot of contrast. Looks pretty cool. That's not what we want, however. We're going to set the color to D1, B2, excuse me, B6, 4, 5. It's kind of this nice washed out mustard orange color. And again, we're going to mask this just to the iris. So Command or Control I to invert our mask. I'll make sure you select the mask. Command or Control I to invert that. I'm going to zoom in and we're going to paint using white over the iris as well. So we've got a much more yellow looking eye now. That looks a little bit better. I like. There we go, something like so. I'm going to zoom out and check it out from back here. That looks pretty good. We want to dodge and burn these eyes, so we're going to create another similar dodge and burn layer. Add a new layer. Control Shift Alt N or Command Shift Option N quickly adds a new layer. We can just name this Dodge/Burn Eyes, or Dode/Burn Eyes in the case of myself. I'm going to grab the Dodge tool, and we're going to zoom in on these eyes. And what I want to do is dodge sort of the bottom right corner it would be of the eyes. Just a couple little, we need to fill that layer with gray. Go edit fill, 50% gray, and set the layer to a blend mode of soft light. Kind of forgot a very important part of the process there. Anyway, we've got the dodge tool now, and we're just going to paint a couple times to brighten up the bottom right of the eyes. So you can see before, after, very, very subtle. Then we're going to hold down our Alt key, and we're really going to burn the top left portion of the eyes. Right? We really want to make that part of the eye quite a bit darker as it fades to this lighter portion of the eye. So there's before, there's after, and I'm even going to duplicate this to intensify that effect even more. So now we've really added a lot of depth to the eyes. You can see what that does right there. Pretty cool. All right, so we can save our document so we don't lose anything. And next we're going to begin by, we're going to begin colorizing the image, specifically the skin. So I'm going to start with just a fresh new layer, and I'm going to name this layer. Well, Command Shift Alt N, or Command Shift Option N, Control Shift Alt N, and I'm going to name this blue. I'm going to set my foreground color to, I've got the hex code written down somewhere here. It's ABC 0D3. So it's sort of this washed out, light, almost steel gray blue color. That's great. We're going to begin painting. I'm going to grab my brush tool, opacity set to 100%, and use a nice large soft edged brush, and I'm just going to begin painting over her skin. Everywhere I can see her skin, I'm going to paint right over it. And I believe, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to paint over everything. We'll mask around her eyes and the lips and everything like that in a moment. And just kind of clean up our painted effect. So, paint over all of that. Great. I'm going to get the shoulders here. And don't worry about it being too perfect. I'm using a nice large soft edge brush, so I have a certain level of forgiveness. But we can always go in with a mask and just perfect this later on. This is where it's going to get kind of tricky along here. Matter of fact, I'm going to reduce my brush opacity to 50%, and I'm just going to paint one stroke over the hair so it sort of just fades into the hair a little bit more naturally. Hit the letter 0, or the number 0, excuse me, to just boost the brush back to 100% opacity. And I'm going to downsize my brush. Whoops, that's a little bit sloppy. I'm going to try that again. There we go. I'm just going to follow that edge. Paint all of this nice and blue. And there we have it. So I've got the blue set, and now what I need to do is set this layer to the blend mode, color. You can see we've made all of her skin very blue. Great, this is nice. I can zoom in here and just check out if there's any areas that I've missed. You can see just a little bit of flesh color there. So I can carefully just go in and make sure that that's gone. And you can be as particular as you want. Again, we're just going to be pretty quick about this. Reduce the opacity of the brush, get some of that blue color in there underneath the hair. And reducing the opacity of the brush is just going to make it look more realistic. If we go in like gangbusters with 100% opacity, it's not going to look as good. Boost the opacity back to 100%. And I'm going to just get along there where I can see a little bit of flesh color peering through. All right, great. Now we need to mask out her eyes and her lips. So I'm just going to throw a mask onto this layer. I'm going to paint with black. And just going to go over the eyes. Oops. We still want the skin around the eyes to be blue. So I believe I'm just going to avoid the eyes like that. All right, again, not being too terribly picky about it, but you know, we still want it to look decent, so there we go. That's great. And now I'm going to check out the lip area, and we're going to begin painting away here, just like so. There we have it. All right, make the brush a little bit smaller. Maybe set the opacity of the brush down around 50%, and just get the edges of the lips out here, like that. Cool. I need a little bit more blue over here. Alright, so just like that, and we have successfully cut out the eyes and the lips. So it looks a little weird right now, but don't worry about that. What we need to do next is finish adjusting the color and the sort of the light and tone of the skin. So we're going to do that first by adding a curves adjustment layer. And we're going to do a few things here with the curves adjustment layer. We're really going to drag down on the darks. All right, you can see it looks really, really crazy. And I'm going to pull back up on the brights, just like that, just to introduce a little bit of contrast. We're going to pull down on the red line. You can see I'm going down to the red channel to introduce a little bit more cyan. All right, and I'm going to go to the blue line, and I'm going to create a nice little S-curve on the blue line to pull some blue out of the shadows and introduce some more blue into the highlights. So it's sort of a subtle S-curve, but you can see before after we are making quite a huge difference. And we're going to mask all of this to the skin area, and we need to, in this case, take care not to hit the eyebrows, the eyes, or the lips. We don't want any of those areas to be affected. So I'm going to select the mask, hit Command or Control I to invert it, and we're going to begin painting over the skin using the brush tool and our brush set to white. Again, I'm going to set my brush tool's opacity to 100%, and let's just paint over her skin, sort of intensifying that blue, giving it that nice dark blue look. Alright, again, I'm going to hit over here by the hair with sort of a 40% opacity brush. Alright, once I'm done with that, go back to 100% opacity and finish painting. I'll probably just touch those single hairs that appear very dark because we don't really want that. And the same over here. See how dark it's getting? Maybe we don't want it quite so dark, but let's just see what it looks like once everything's finished and everything's painted in. We don't want to allow our eyes to completely fool us here. Brushing in carefully around the lips is pretty important because the next layer that we're going to add is really going to accentuate any mistakes that we've made here with regard to this mask that we're painting. But still, in the interest of time, I'm sort of rushing through it, but don't worry. We'll still make it look nice. Alright, I'm going to size my brush down, paint along the top edge of the lips like so. Make sure that we've got all that painted in. Come over here by this eye. Paint all of that in. And just follow along with me, painting as we go. I'm going to avoid these eyebrows as best I can. Again, we're going to have to come in and adjust this mask almost certainly once we apply our next layer, and you're going to see kind of how it's going to do some crazy things with us. But don't worry, it's all part of the joy of using Photoshop. You know, you do something and hey, all of a sudden you need to start making some crazy changes, but so far so good. Just minor adjustments. Alright, so all I have to do is finish painting in the blue up here on the forehead area. Very nice. And something sort of like that, excuse me. So we're going to back out. Looks like I missed her ear here. And the ear, because it's set back a little bit and is a little bit lighter, I'm going to reduce the opacity of my brush to about 50%-ish. So I've got 56% painting with white, and I'm just going to paint in some of my effect over the ear. Looks great. Cool. Alright, so now that we've done that, you can see there's before, there's after. Oh, looks like we need to get this shoulder over here. Make sure our brush is at 100% opacity. Go ahead and paint in any areas that you may have missed. And there we go. Just like that, we've got our skin all nice and blue. And you can see it still looks like we're missing some areas there. I'm not sure if that's because of this or because of the blue layer beneath here. I'm going to try with this layer and make sure that I've got all that painted in nice and blue. Yeah, there we go. That looks a little bit better. And then with this, with my curves layer, I can now sort of expand it a little bit. But just take note, we don't want too much of that black line. I'll probably come in a moment and we'll adjust this mask and get rid of some of that. But let's just go through this, you know, as if we have no idea what we're getting into, so we can adjust and fix all of those problems, because if I'm running into them here, certainly I'm sure you're going to run into them at some point when you try to mimic this tutorial. So I'm going to save my document, and we're going to now create a black and white adjustment layer. So that's right here, the black and white adjustment layer. I'm going to leave all of the settings as they are. And I'm going to set this layer to the blend mode of multiply. You can see it looks pretty cool. I'm going to now duplicate this mask that we set to our curves adjustment layer. I'm alt dragging, that'd be option drag on the Mac, up to the black and white adjustment layer. It's saying, hey, would you like to replace this layer mask? Absolutely. Go ahead and apply that. And you can see we've got some crazy things happening because it looks like we missed some areas in our mask. So, by the way, I just alt or option clicked the mask. Alright, so we've missed some areas in our mask. So I'm going to correct them here, right here on the mask. I'm just going to paint with white over any areas that seem to be missing anything. Like that. There we go. And then down here you can see we've missed a couple areas. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm going to check out my black and white adjustment layer. And it looks like here, especially around the eyes, we need to adjust this a little bit. The eyebrows look extraordinarily fake. So I'm going to go back to the curves adjustment layer. Now I'm going to weaken my brush quite a bit. I'm going to set it down to maybe about 20% opacity. And I'm going to begin painting with white over the eyebrows and sort of around the eyebrows. Again, just gently trying to blend all this together. The thing is, I don't want the eyebrows to look completely black. So now I'm going to paint over the eyebrows with I'm on the mask for the black and white adjustment layer now. All right, so we're just trying to blend it all together nice and gently. All right, there's before, there's after. This eyebrow still looks a little wacky, but that actually may be because there's too much. Well, no, that's not what it is. All right, so we're going to just gonna mess with this a little bit more. All right, so what I need to do is just lighten that up a little bit there. Just looked a little funky. It was bugging me. All right, so I just eased up on the mask a little bit, and you can see it looks a little crazy, but again, we're going to get accustomed to that. As far as her skin looking blue, we're going to start to color correct everything. But you can see down here where we didn't paint away on those hairs, looks really bad. We need to adjust that. Here up around the hairline looks pretty bad. We need to adjust that. And the lips also look pretty bad. So this begins with us down here on the curves adjustment layer, going ahead and taking a look with the brush tool. I can shut off the black and white adjustment layer for a moment, and I'm just going to begin painting with black over any of these areas that appear to be giving me issues. Alright, so I don't really think I have much of anything on the strap of the dress. I'm going to boost the opacity to something like 70%, alright? And we're going to size the brush way down, and I'm just going to paint away over this little piece of hair, and the same thing over here. Paint away on this piece of hair. You can see it looks pretty bad right now. Don't worry, we're going to adjust this in a moment. What I'm going to do to make all this look better, I'm just going to grab with my lasso tool this whole chunk, because it doesn't look like it's faded and blended together enough. So I just grab my lasso tool. I've just selected that entire area that contains those sort of rough areas of the mask. We're on the mask for the curves adjustment layer. I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur this a good 5, 6, 7 pixels. Go ahead and hit OK, Command or Control D to deselect, and that looks much more in place. Now I need to clean up the side of her face. We had too much that's falling off the side of her face. My opacity is right around 70%. And you can see we're getting rid of just sort of this black line, and we're not even on the black and white adjustment layer yet. So if we just copy this layer mask up, it's going to do a lot of good for us, but we probably aren't going to really do that, because then we're going to get rid of all that blending we did for the eyebrows. I just know that this is still going to affect the black and white adjustment layer, because the black and white adjustment layer is sitting on top of this color layer. And you can see this shadow here on the side of her neck is also too strong, so to weaken that, I'm going to reduce my opacity down to about 10-15%, make my brush a bit larger, and I'm just going to begin painting some of that away. Again, very gently, because I don't want to adjust the color too much. But there we go, cool. I'm going to turn the black and white adjustment layer back on. You can see we've pretty much fixed all of these areas here. Looks like we've got a little bit that's hanging out off of her shoulder here, so let's get rid of that. There we go. And if we had the problem on that layer mask, remember we copied it, so it's probably a problem on the curves layer mask as well. Cool, so we clean that up. All this looks good. Now on the black and white adjustment layer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to gently paint away around the hair here where it's giving me some issues. Alright, looks pretty good. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. I'm going to paint away some more of this. There we go, like so. I'm actually going to put a little bit of that black and white adjustment layer back into there. We could paint away some on this side of her neck. I actually think I kind of like it that dark, but you know what? Just because I can, I'm going to go ahead and paint some of it away. Now, I still have this issue here on the side of her face. You can see this really dark line. So again, with the brush tool, we're going to boost it up to about 90% opacity. All right, and I'm going to size it way down, and we're going to go through and just begin removing that line, like so. All right, so just right up the side of her face. Get rid of that line, and what do you know? That looks a whole lot better. And what I also need to do is get rid of this dark hairline effect that's happening. And also this back ear is also pretty dark. So I'm going to set the opacity to about 40%. I'm painting with the color black, so we're covering up. And I'm just going to run over that ear once or twice. You can see. There we go. We're saving a lot more of that. And then I'm also going to go along the edge of the hair so I can get rid of some of that blackened hairline, which does not look all that great. Nope. One time looks like it was about enough. You can even really, the way to do this is go in and mask each of these individual hairs. But again, we're not taking the time in this tutorial to do that. But that would be the really, really good way to do that. You could even do like a channel-based selection of the hair and use, the brush set to a blend mode of soft light or overlay or something like that. But again, like I said, we're not going to quite go that crazy this time around. I'm in here in the curves adjustment layer. I'm just spending a little bit of time because I am still going to sort of obsess over what we're getting just because I can't help myself. Alright, so there we go. That looks, I guess, a little bit better. I'm going to go to the black and white adjustment layer and just fade some of that together using a very large brush set to a very low opacity. So there's before and there's after. We've got skin now that's much closer to the color that we want. Oh, you know what? We still have to go clean up the lips as well. So you can see we've got this dark burn line on the lips as well as in these sort of shadowy pockets here in the lips. We can get rid of that pretty easily with the brush tool. Let's size the brush way down, set the opacity to about 90%, and just go in there and paint that stuff right away. Whoops. No big deal at all when it comes to that. We do, however, want to be careful not to create like glowing edges of the lips like you see I sort of did there. So I'll go in there and then down to the curves adjustment layer, and again we're going to paint that additional added color away when it comes to the curves adjustment layer too. So there we go. We sort of, well, let me get rid of some of this down here. So we've sort of got what we like going on here. We're going to color the lips in just a moment. It's going to help them blend a little bit better. But this is kind of what takes the most time, I would say, is just painting in over all the skin, masking in all the details, as you just witnessed with me doing that. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and colorize the lips. So we're going to create a new layer by hitting the new layer icon. We can name this lip color. There we go, and I'm going to zoom in on the lips, and we're going to paint with a blue, maybe even the original blue that we used. Maybe not, though. Let's just adjust it to something else. Let's try 9BC2E4. So a little bit more of a saturated blue, and I'm very carefully going to paint right over these lips. So my opacity should be at 100%, and I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to paint ever so gently over these lips and just try to fade this blue into the blue of the skin that is already existing. There we go. Looks good. And again, if we need to mask this, we'll be able to mask it. It won't be any problem at all. There we go. And just to make this a little bit more perfect-ish, just like so. Now, we're going to set this layer to a blend mode of multiply. You can see, yes, in fact, we do have too much around some of these edges. Throw a mask on it, painting with the color black, and I'm just very, very gently going to go over it and just sort of fade it all together. There we go, very nice. Just like that. Alright, so I can zoom out, and I guess they could stand to use a little bit more work, but again, we're not going to spend all of our time just playing with the lips, but yeah, I would spend a little bit more time on the edges of those lips, just making them a little bit more perfect. So now that we've done that, we can add sort of the face paint, the mask, the tattoos. I don't really know what they are. So I'm going to save this document, and this is going to be a downloadable file. I'll include the download link in this tutorial in the description of this video. Wherever you're watching this video, hopefully there will be a way to find this avatar mask .png file. So it's a .png, so it's completely transparent. We can just drag it right into our Photoshop document. I've made it pretty large, so it should pretty much fit any Photoshop file, or for the most part any image that you're shooting, as long as you're not using a massively huge monstrosity of a camera. So we're going to size this down. I'm holding down my Shift and Alt, to be Shift and Option on the Mac keys. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to line up these two thin little wisps on the sides of her nose. That and this sort of center pillar. I know where those go. So this kind of looks good. Not quite, though. I need to make it just a little bit larger. And then I need to nudge it down just a little bit. There we go. Something like that looks about right. I can hold down my Alt or Option key and maybe even pinch it in from the sides just a little bit. She's got sort of a narrowish face compared to this mask. We're going to go ahead and commit the change, and there we go. We've got our mask in place. It's just a matter of setting this mask to the blend mode of soft light. Alright, and you can see it's going to start blending very nicely. We need to now go ahead, and mask this in. You can see it's sticking out and, does not look realistic at all. So we need to mask this as well. Boy, are we doing a lot of masking over the last, 35, 40 minutes. So let's apply a layer mask here, grab the brush tool once again, and I'm going to leave, I'm going to set the opacity to about 50%, and I'm going to size the brush up. We want a very, very soft edge brush. Set your foreground color to black, and I'm going to begin by painting away the additional stuff down here, and I'm even going to fade the edge so it almost looks like it's wrapping back around her neck. Alright, and you can see that these sort of tattoo mask pieces on her neck look very fake, almost like they should be displaced there instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over them a couple times to really make them very, very subtle. Alright, something like so. I just want them to be a nice little subtle effect down there. Not necessarily something that's jumping out at you, but still a little bit of texture there. So I'm going to zoom a little bit closer here, and I'm going to begin painting away right up here, right onto the cheek. And again, I'm just going to fade those edges in, so it's as if they just wrap right around her head. And the same thing up here. I want them to just fade right underneath of her hair. Alright, just like so. Just going to come right through here. There we go, something like that. And the same thing over here on this cheek. So there we go, just like that. We've sort of faded the mask in so it fits her face and everything looks great. So the next step is to add the little sparkly sparkles to her face. So we're going to do that by creating a new layer. Go down and choose the new layer icon. And we're going to name this first layer Sparkles. I'm just going to name it Sparkles because we're going to duplicate this layer a few times. I already know that. So I'm going to zoom in a couple times. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm actually going to open up my brush panel. So Window, Brush. You can see we've got our brush panel. So here's where things, you want to sort of follow as closely as you can what I'm doing. And these settings are sort of for a massive image like this, but the only thing you're going to have to adjust is the size of your brush. I already know I want a brush that's sized 15 pixels and has a hardness of 100%. We're going to start with a very hard edge brush, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Select Shape Dynamics next, and increase the size jitter to 100%. Then we're going to go to Scattering. And now under Scattering, we're going to do it along both axes, and we're going to set the scattering to 1000%. So you can see we're just scattering these little white dots everywhere. So I'm going to set my foreground and background color to default, and then hit the letter X to make white my background color. And you can see if I paint, well, I need my opacity set to 100%. If I paint, I'm getting a huge amount of dottiness happening. Too much. So we need to go back. We're going to click on Brush Tip Shape again, and we're going to increase our spacing up to about 650%. You know, I feel like something like 630 might be a little bit better. So we're going to go 630%. I'm going to push my brush tool over here into my dock, and we're going to begin by just painting with these sort of short, quick draws of the brush. All right, just short, quick strokes, and just splatter all of these little sparkles at the bridge of her nose, onto her forehead a little bit. We want these to extend out over the eyebrows. All right, then we're going to come down the nose. All right, sparkles to the tips of the nose. Then we're going to increase with sparkles under the eyes. All right, you don't want to go too overboard with the sparkles, so just be careful. A little bit under the nose here, almost as if we're making a sparkly mustache. And then a couple sparkles on the chin. And then I'm going to do a line of sparkles sort of on both sides of the neck. Those are going to become very, very subtle. So you can see we sort of have our sparkle pattern laid out the way we want it over her face. Now that we've done this, we want to duplicate the sparkle layer by hitting Command or Control J 1, 2, and 3 times. So we have sparkles. I'm going to name this one Sparkles 02, and I'm going to name this one Sparkles 03. And this is just so if we need to talk about these, we'll have the reference. And then Sparkles 04. So Sparkles number 1, we're going to shut off the top 3 sparkle layers. Sparkles, the original Sparkles layer, I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to Gaussian blur this. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I want to use somewhat of a subtle Gaussian blur, something probably like 3.5 pixels, 3.5, 4 pixels. 3.5 looks, oh, it's just about perfect. So there's with no blur, there's 3.5 pixels, looks incredible. So we're going to turn on the Sparkles 2 layer, and we're just going to hit Command or Control F to blur that 3.5 pixels as well. And we're going to set both of these initial sparkle layers to the blend mode of overlay. So overlay and overlay. Now we're going to go to the third sparkles layer, Sparkles-03. And this layer I just want to set to the blend mode of screen, and I'm going to reduce the opacity down around 30%. There's before, there's after. We're just adding a little bit of a punch to some parts of our sparkles. Then we're going to turn on Sparkles 04. Now Sparkles 04 is going to be interesting because we're going to zoom way in here. We're going to Command or Control click on the layer thumbnail of Sparkles 04, and you can see we're loading a little circular selection around each of our sparkles. We're going to go Select, Modify, Contract, and contract this selection by 2 pixels. Hit OK. You can see we're now just preserving or selecting these little tiny circles in the middle of our sparkles. Now I'm going to go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection. So we're going to get rid of all of the other part of this one sparkle layer except for this little dot in the middle. So basically what we've done, if we shut it off and turn it on, you can't see a huge difference, but there's a difference there. And we're going to set this layer to the blend mode of overlay, by the way. Let me move to a darker part of the face. So if we shut that layer off and turn it on, you can see it just adds like this little sparkle right to the middle of our sparkle because it's a smaller little dot in there. So there we go. We have the sparkle layer and the sparkles layers. What I want to do is select each of these layers. You can control click them all, or command click on the Mac, I suppose it would be. There we go, and hit command or control G to group them into a layer group. Name this sparkles, and we're going to mask some areas. Like for instance, we need to get rid of this one sparkle here on her eyebrow. Anything that doesn't look right, we can mask away. We're going to mask and darken the sparkles on her neck as well. But also, we want to just reduce the overall opacity of these sparkles to about 75%, something like that. And I'm going to drop a layer mask onto this layer group. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to grab my brush tool, I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to choose one of the default brushes here, something like the 48 pixel hard edge brush, paint with black, and I'm just going to paint right over that one sparkle, and I think that's the only sparkle that I absolutely need to get rid of. That one might be a little bit too close there. This one might be a little bit too in the dark. Looks like something just kind of straggling out there. Anything that looks like you should just clean it up or get rid of it, you can do that with. And then for these ones on the neck, I'm going to reduce the opacity of my brush to about 30%, and I'm just going to paint over them one time each. That doesn't quite look right. So 2 times each, 3 times each, 4 times each, and then anywhere where it kind of sinks into a shadow, I'm going to make that just a little bit darker. So just a very subtle effect there on the neck, you know, something you'll just sort of notice out of the corner of your eyes, just like the sort of tattooy, masky stuff happening. So we've now created most of our avatar person. What we want to do is do sort of a final round of dodging and blurring, and then just a little bit of colorizing to sort of make all this blend together just a little bit more. So we're going to create another new layer by going layer, new layer, and we're going to name this dodge slash burn hyphen final. And you know, some people say you should never name anything final, but in this case I'm pretty sure that it's going to be final. So we're going to go edit fill this layer with 50% gray, and then set the blend mode to soft light. Now that we've done that, again, grab your burn or your dodge tool, excuse me. We're going to make the dodge brush a little bit bigger, and we're going to just sort of go over some of the same areas that we went over before when we did our dodging. The only reason that I'm not duplicating those original layers is because it's almost healthy for the image to just sort of have to repaint some of you know, what you had initially painted, just because it's going to be a little bit different. So don't get lazy and just copy that, because it's just going to give you a more high quality, organic look, almost like you weren't just copying and pasting things. Alright, cool. And then I'll add some light down here. Especially since, too, you're going to look at the image slightly different once you get it to this point. We're going to increase there that highlight on her lip and above the lips. Great. Over here. Cool, cool. I'm going to even add some brightness beneath the eye there, because I'm afraid that, especially if we zoom way out, we don't want it to look like she's got a big black eye. See how it looks like that eye is really dark? Almost like she has, you know, like Navajo Indian war paint over there or something. We don't really want that. So we'll carefully just run over that and brighten it up. So you can see, there's what we've done. Then I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and we're just going to burn some of this stuff in. Burn in some of these areas. Obviously, we don't just want to go and burn in what we just lightened either, so just be careful about it. I'm going to focus on these details here beneath her nose, and I believe the proper avatar people have this same sort of lip color on the bottom of the nose. We don't really see enough for the bottom of her nose to justify certainly taking the time to do that right here, right now, but we could. You know what else I'm going to do? With my dodge tool, I'm just going to paint over these highlights in her hair to make them pop a little bit more. Alright, see these lines of light we have in her hair. And by the way, when I'm dodging and burning, usually that's for the most part what I'm doing. You're just following generally where you see highlights and shadows in the image, and you're accentuating those highlights and shadows. So, now that we've done that, you can see there's before, there's after. I'm going to duplicate this dodge or burn layer 1, 2, 3 times, so we get a very plasticine look. Alright, you can see there's before the dodging and burning, there's after the dodging and burning. Just got way too much light in this eye now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my top dodge and burn layer. I'm going to grab my brush tool. Remember, that layer was 50% gray, so if I just paint with 50% gray, open up my color picker, set the brightness to 50%, I've got 50% gray. If I just paint over that with 50% gray, I'm going to set the opacity to about 100%. Alright, whoop, make sure it's a nice soft edge brush, so we're not seeing any hard edges at all. Go in there and bring some of that darkness back. Still not enough, so I'll go to the second dodge burn layer, bring some of that hardness back. Still not enough. Now here I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit and bring some of that darkness back. So if I zoom out, you can see still isn't looking like she has a black eye, but it looks more like the eye fits in. So there we go. You can see before, after, and that looks quite a bit better. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and add another solid fill layer by going Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color. We're going to set the blend mode to Soft Light, and this is going to sort of colorize the entire image and bring everything together. The color that I want to fill it with is 3F6991, so it's sort of this deep blue color. You can see it's making everything really nice, dark and blue. I want to paint away this effect on her skin, however, so I'm going to select the layer mask, zoom out just a touch, grab my brush tool, set the opacity to something like 50, 60, 65%, let's say, and just begin painting over her skin with a large, soft-edged brush, just slowly but surely to get rid of that additional crazy blue color. And you can see, just like that, we begin to sort of fade everything together. We could at this point add a selective color adjustment and bring a little bit more black into the blacks, maybe bring a little bit more blue into the blacks and the highlights. Get rid of some of that magenta in the darker areas. We don't want to go too crazy on that though. Then in the whites, we can bring the blacks up in the whites to sort of soften our highlights just a touch. Or we can remove some of the black from our highlights to make those highlights a little more intense. Make the highlights a little more blue. And yeah, just a couple little color adjustments here and there. So there's before, there's after. Extremely subtle stuff. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you can take a photograph and turn it into this avatar figurine. As I said at the beginning of this, the other blue creature that's not a Smurf. So there we go. We've created this from, well, we can go back and look at the original image we started with just a little while ago, which was this. We've turned it into this. So using these principles by adding detail to the skin, a little dodging and burning, enlarging the eyes, enlarging the irises once the eyes have been enlarged, adding that detail to the eyes, adding the color to the eyes, colorizing the skin and affecting the tone and the contrast and the color of the skin, masking and blending in that foreign mask. Then a little bit more dodging and burning after you've applied those sparkles, and then one color layer to sort of help pull everything together nicely, which by the way has a mask, and you can mask this or that to make everything fade together perfectly. And you have yourself a nice little avatar character that you've created using Photoshop. So that is it for this one. It's been a long one, but I hope you've learned a thing or two. I certainly hope you've made it. And if you've made it to this point, give yourself a round of applause and a pat on the back. And thank you so much for sticking around. Go check out the website. That's www.tutvid.com. And make sure that you follow me on Twitter @tutvid for all the new, latest, and greatest updates when it comes to tech and the design world, as well as other articles and tutorials coming out of tutvid.com. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you later.